Hey guys, thank you for listening to this episode of Game of Gymnastics Podcast. This week I'm going to be going through the European scores, how GB match up with the rest of Europe, and then also comparing it to the Asian champs scores, comparing Europe and Asia, and hopefully seeing how GB match up too. Should also give you some sort of insights into what sort of scores are good, bad, sideways on each of the apparatus as an all-rounder and as a specialist. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Game of Gymnastics Podcast. This week we have got a bit of a comparison between the European scores and the Asian scores. So first off, I'm going to go through the European scores and look at how GB compares to the rest of Europe. And then I'm going to switch my focus to comparing the European scores to the Asian scores, because I think there's some very interesting numbers in there. And some, quite frightening numbers in there as well, to say the least. So, in front of me, I have a spreadsheet of qualification scores, final scores, and a few numbers here and there, like averages, things like that, between them. First off, we're going to do the team event, because that was the first thing that happened. We had it was all around qualifications, and apparatus qualifications, and the team final all at the same time. So we'll start with that, just the team scores in general, and then go forwards from there. So GB1, that's the first big thing that we should all be very happy about. It was an amazing competition, and the boys did so well, and I'm very happy for them. So Jonas Rushworth, Luke Whitehouse and Harry Hepworth, who were the Leeds lads who also went to British teams, and then Jake Jarman and Jamie Lewis, who were also at the competition and all did some amazing work in especially the team event, because they managed to come out with the gold. Okay, so what I've done is I've put all of the scores together, including... So I've gone highest to lowest score on each apparatus of the three that count, and then obviously the totals, and then I took the average of the top three of each totals of each apparatus in Europe, and then compared them to our scores, what we got. Obviously, total score, we're ahead because we came in first, and we came in first by a relatively significant margin as well, by 1.8. Actually, almost exactly 1.8. And yeah, so floor, obviously we're ahead because we had three scores over 14, 14.4, 14.266, and 14.033. 14.4 was from Harry Hepworth, 14.266 from Luke Whitehouse, and 14.033 from Jake Jarman. We all know that they can score very similar. Jake Jarman scored 14.4 in the mixed event, and Harry Hepworth scored 14.4 in this event, and then Luke Whitehouse scored 14.5 in the final. So we all know that they can score around about 14.5. So our floor is in a very, very strong position, especially with those three in it. Next we move on to pommels, 40.199. So we were at 13.633, 13.466, and 13.1. Now, these scores are quite a bit somewhat down on what we'd want, and they're down on the average of the top three. So the average was 40.821. That's including ours. So we're down about 0.7 on the average, which means that we really need to push on pommels. We really need to push for getting those scores up, if not with different members, then just making sure that the members that we do have in the team are more consistent and scoring a bit higher. We want potentially one up towards 14, and then the rest around 13.5-ish is sort of what I think we want to be aiming for, but that's just from what I've seen and from what I've experienced. Next, rings. Obviously, Harry Hepworth is very, very strong on rings, so we had a good chance on that. So 14.4, 13.666, and 13.633. Luke Whitehouse and Jamie Lewis delivered pretty good ring scores as well, which is how we've managed to come well above the average. I think we're about nearly 2 marks above the average on rings, which is amazing, and just a testament to how strong our rings is as a country, which is weird because about two years ago, a year ago, rings was our weakest, like one of our weakest. So just a few changes here and there, a few things being pushed here and there, and we're way up, even without Courtney's score on there, which was 14.4 as well, because he went as an individual and then made 2 finals, which is incredible. Next, vault. So yeah, obviously vault we're ahead because we've got Jake Jarman, we've got Harry Hepworth, and then we've got a solid backlog of everyone else. We ended up having Jamie Lewis do a very clean double. No, was it Jamie Lewis or was it Luke? It was probably Luke Whitehouse doing a clean double front, and scoring a good 13.9, so 9.1 execution on a 4.8. So good scores. Then obviously we've got 14.766, 14.466, which are very high, from Jake's 3.5 and Harry's drag, I imagine, or handspring 2.5. I can't remember, but they're worth the same, so it doesn't really make too much of a difference regardless. So vault, we're way up, which is good. Next, P-bars and high bar. So I'll do them together because they're relatively similar, because we're down on both. Not by too much in terms of the average, but this is the average of the top 3 only in Europe. So if we want to push for world medals and world team medals, then we really need to push on these 2 apparatus. High bar we weren't too much down on, but P-bars we were a little bit further. Obviously, Courtney did an amazing P-bars routine, stuck his dismount, scored 13.833, which I would have pushed it up a little bit. But in terms of having consistent high scores on P-bars, we do struggle a bit. We scored 13.7, 13.633, and 13.1, which, like with pommels, none of those are bad scores. None of those are low by any means. But it's just in terms of, in the context of the rest of the world, and when you've got Japan and China scoring ridiculous scores, 14 for all 3, you need to be pushing for a bit more. And then similar with high bar, 13.233, 13.133, 13. Again, all good scores, all solid scores, especially for all-rounders, which most of these people would be. And I know Jonas had a bit of a close Coleman and stuff like that. So these scores could be higher. But if we want to be pushing for those higher scores, then we need to be pushing for high bar. Pommel, P-bar, high bar is what it looks like, is the sort of apparatus that we need to be working on. Just from looking at the average, purely just looking from that perspective, we've got floor, rings, vault above the average, and then pommel, P-bar, high bar below the average. Yes, not by much because we won, but still something to be considered. Hey guys, Winston here. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please do leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you can. Also, if you want more gymnastics content from me, you can check out my Instagram at wpowell05 or my TikTok at winstonpowell5. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode. Now we'll look at, I don't have a spreadsheet for the Asian champs because they happened relatively recently at the time of recording this, so I haven't had time to collate them, and I'm not sure I particularly want to, I'll be honest. It just made me feel bad about where we're all at. If we look at Japan's scores, who won the all-around at the Asian champs. So, floor, 42.133, so we're ahead of that. Pommel horse, we're below by 0.6, which is shockingly little, I'll be honest. We're above on rings by a couple of tenths. We're above on vault by about a mark. But then we're 3 or 2.6 below on P-bars, and we're 4 marks below on high bar. So that's where the biggest gaps are, really, for us. So P-bars and high bar are the biggest gaps. like the first 4 apparatus, floor, pommel, rings, vault, were relatively similar, regardless of like looking between the two. And our total scores were about 5 marks apart, which means that the pretty much all of it is coming from P-bars and high bar, which is something that the national coaches have echoed, and a lot of the people within the national sort of setup have noticed and want to improve on. Next, we look at all-around. I'll look at the all-around finals for this, but in terms of with regards to qualifications, let's see over here. What was it? It was 24th was 77.5, which is relatively high, if I'm honest. Got a decent amount of depth. We've got 11 above 80. So that's a good amount, and we've got a good solid amount of people scoring high on those apparatus, which is good to see. But in terms of the final, number 1 for us was at 82.398, which was Adam Azil. He had an amazing competition, and crushed it, honestly. Like, he was nearly a mark above everyone else. But when you compare it to the scores of the Asian Games, you see that he would have come 5th in that competition. The only difference being with the Asian Games is that in Europe we had 8 people, all above 80. And in the Asian Games, they had... Wait, what the hell? Oh, they did all around with... Okay, so they did all around at the start. So their qualification was their all around event, is what I'm learning from this, because there's 3 Japanese people in this. But including everyone, we would have had the top 7 of the all-around final in Europe would have been between 4th and 5th in the Asian Games. That's what I've just seen from this. So Adam Azil, Leo Saladino, Christopher Mazarosh, Anthony Mansard, Niels Dunkel, Noah Seifert, and Joel Platter all would have placed between 4th and 5th if they had gone into the Asian Games instead. The only exception to that rule is Casimir Schmidt, who would have come 6th. But again, not a huge difference. So with this, you can sort of see that we've got a little bit more depth, which is quite nice. We've got a few more people who are scoring above 80, which is quite nice. I'm honestly a little bit surprising, because with Asia you always assume that they've got like the biggest teams, but then when you actually look at it, you see that it's Japan and China that are contributing to that, and then a lot of the other countries struggle a little bit. They've got a few, like Milad Karimi, who's an amazing gymnast from Kazakhstan, who actually didn't place in the all-round, must have made a mistake here and there. But then you've got Carlos Yulo from the Philippines, who ended up coming 3rd with 83.632, which is an amazing score, again above anyone else in Europe. So when you look at the highest scores, they are way ahead in terms of all around, but that's always been true, so it's hard to compare the two. In terms of what people should be aiming for at like the best of the best level, I think 83 pushing for 84 is like one of the top levels. But then you've got people like Oka Shinosuke, who is the Olympic all-around champion, who is scoring 85. So there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, I suppose. If you're like me, you struggle with rips on your hands, seemingly at the worst possible times, like in a competition prep, for example. I'm proud to partner with Wad & Dunn, who have a solution for us gymnasts to help us train and protect our hands in the process. I especially recommend their rip guards for apparatus using grips or guards, whatever you want to call them, high bar, rings or A-bars, and their 3-step hand care kit to make sure your halluses are strong and rip resistant without making them soft. Use my code PAL at checkout or my link in the description for 10% off at checkout. Now, back to the episode. So, next we go on to the finals. Now, with floor, it's actually not that much different to Europe in terms of what the Asian Games gymnasts scored. But something I did notice is that every single person who got in the top 3 in the floor final got a stick bonus. Carlos Yulo, Milad Karimi, and Moon, I'm not going to try and pronounce that surname, all got a stick bonus in their routines. And the third place also got a penalty, but still managed to score above 14, which is insane. But yeah, like in terms of the scores themselves, not too far apart. So I think as a continent, Europe is not far behind in terms of floor at all. Next, we look at pommels. So with pommels, I think for us as a continent, we've got a lot more depth in terms of our pommels. We had 7 people all above 14 in the pommel final, which is even more crazy because you've only got 8 people in the final. And if someone messes up, they're probably not going to score above a 14. But then you've also got people like Gabriel Targeta? I don't know. Who made a mistake and still scored 14-4 and got a bronze medal. Like, it wasn't a huge mistake, mind you. It was just a slight thing here. I think it was like a 3/10 mistake. But in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't have medalled him, but it meant he was at 14-4 instead of like 14-7-ish. But in terms of their first place, it was 2 tenths higher. It wasn't, which isn't like a crazy amount higher, considering our first place, in Europe, the person who got first had a 5.6 difficulty, and Kurbanov has 6.2. So if Hamlet can get the difficulty up and keep the execution at the ridiculous level it's at, like 9.166 execution on a pommel routine is unreal. Like I can't stress enough how crazy that is. But he's always been incredible. We've competed against him in junior Euros, and then Mamikon is very similar and scored incredibly similar as well. Only with 1/10 difference in their difficulty and execution. But in terms of the depth, I think we've got it, because our bronze and silver medalists were above their bronze and silver medalists scores, but their first place was just a bit higher, purely from difficulty though. When we look at rings, they had some insane ring scores. They have some genuinely insane ring scores. They have one insane ring score, 14.933. Our top score was 14.4. In terms of the whole competition, 14.7, which Adam Azell got in the all-around. So yeah, like, they are... Yeah, I can't even, like, begin to describe how crazy it is. But their execution is consistently incredibly high. Like 8.9s almost across the board. But the only difference being that we had a very strong roster in ours. So 14.4, 14.4, 14.366, 14.333, 14.333, 14.333. So we had 6 people around that sort of mark. And they had one above it and then none around it. So in terms of like depth, again, Europe has it. Because we've just got so many more countries that are competent. Not competent, that's mean. We've got so many more countries that have the facilities for gymnastics and for gymnastics at the highest level. So we can produce more gymnasts, whereas in a lot of the Asian countries, they won't have as easy access to it, except for in countries like Japan and China, who have historically been incredible and stupidly good, for lack of a better word. There's not much else to that really. But next we look at vault, which is my favorite one because we're ahead. Without a shadow of a doubt, we're ahead in terms of the averages, in terms of our first place, in terms of our top 3. We're ahead, which is amazing. They actually had more depth. Actually, no. It was about the same. But in terms of our first and second place finishers, we were ahead because we have Arta Davtyan and Jake Jarman, who are topping the roster. And when you've got a score like 15.2 on vault, it's very hard to match it. It's very hard to get anywhere near it. But yeah, I think with vault, we're in a very good position in terms of as a continent, in terms of as a country with Jake and Harry, because he also only came 4th. Like he wasn't even far off, not by much at least. Messed up his first vault a little bit, so I think with him he just needs to, obviously clean up the first vault, get his 256s on, his pike drag and his triple twist, handspring triple twist, and he's golden. P-bars, I mentioned in terms of with GB in general, but it's also European because, I was thinking this before, but with our European scores, it's a lot lower than what I was expecting in terms of final scores, in terms of what qualified, in terms of... actually, no, not in terms of what qualified, because we had a ton around 13.8, which is about what you'd expect to qualify. It's just that the top score was 14.4, and then second qualifying was 39. So, there wasn't much. There wasn't many people up there. But then you've also got people like Arakan, who fell, and then Oleg Vanayev also fell, who have the biggest difficulties. So it's hard to compare them when you've got people making mistakes left, right, and centre. Not to disparage the people who did get the highest scores. Niels Dunkel did a really nice routine. And then Timo Eder, I don't actually know what happened. I was thinking this the other day, and I was thinking this when it happened and after it happened, and I still can't figure it out. What the hell was his penalty for? Because there's a couple of options. There's maybe a time penalty for the warm up, maybe a time penalty for being after the green light. But then the only other options are like descent, and it's like doesn't exactly seem like the type, is what I'll say. So yeah, I don't 100% know what the penalty was for. I'll actually get up what the penalty could have been for right now, actually. So point 3s are any attire violations, not the case. Non-respect of the official warm-up time, that could be the case. Not acknowledging the D1 judge before or after the exercise. He definitely presented after, but potentially not before. That was one option I was thinking. Exceeding 30 seconds before commencing time, exceeding 30 seconds before continuing after a fall. Couldn't be that one because he didn't fall. Remounting the podium after the exercise, not the same. Definitely not the case because he left immediately. You can see in the video. And then other undisciplined or abusive behavior, I highly doubt it. So, and those are the only 0.3 violations. So my only thought is that it's potentially either non-respect of the official warm-up time, which is a potential, and then not acknowledging the D1 judge before the performance. You can see that he presents after, but you can't see if he presents before, and that's the only reason I bring that up. So, Timo Hedda, if you watch this, then please do let me know. It's been bugging me for ages, because if he hadn't got that penalty, he would have won. Because he had a really nice routine. Stuck this man and everything. 9 execution. It was so good. But yeah, not 100% sure about what happened there, but it is what it is, I suppose. And then Leo Saladino as well. I'm not sure what his why his difficulty was down on his qualification and on his all around, because he got like 5.3, I think it was. But he didn't get that either time. Well, he didn't get that for the, or like 5.2 or something. He didn't get that but for the P-Bars final. And the routine looked fine, I think. It's hard to tell. But that one matters less because I don't think he would have medalled. I think it was like 3/10 down, so I don't think he would have medalled regardless. But yeah, it was just weird. P-Bars final was weird to watch. That is one thing I will say. I was very confused most of the time, and I like to think that I know gymnastics quite well. Yeah, not sure. Anyway, but yeah, going back to comparing it to the Asian scores, you've got the top score at 14.7, then 14.466, then 14.166, and then fourth was 14.066, and fifth was 13.9. And fifth was the same as the top score for Europe. So, yeah, I don't know. Asia just seems quite far ahead. It always has done, especially in P-Bars, because they've always had people like Zhu Jingwan, who is, like, yeah, just incredible and very hard to compare to anyone because he's always been so far ahead. And like in the Olympic final, he was, yeah, he scored above 16 and everyone else was fighting amongst themselves about getting like 15 fives. So when you've got people like that around, it's very hard to compete. But also he wasn't even in this final. I don't actually know. He might have retired at this point. But yeah, Oka Shinosuke winning it with a bonus. Then Tomoharu Sunagai, who was Junior World's Champion on P-Bars, was second, and then Carlos Fido third. And every single one of them scored way above anyone in the Euros. It's not quite being fair to Europe because we've got people like Arakan and Vanayev who fell in the final, and then people like Joe Fraser who wasn't around for this sort of competition. And then people that can score very high as well, even like people like Jonas who, yes, they're not massively experienced, but they can score 14 plus, and they have done. And I'm sure every other nation has similar people that can score 14 plus, but just haven't had the chance to do it at this sort of level. But in terms of the competition results, which is all we can really rely upon and compare against right now, that's just what's stood. Then you look at high bar, which is even more dire because we have no excuse for the high bar. We have no excuse because I don't think we've got anyone who can score anywhere near what the Asian scores were. So you've got Tang Shihung on high bar, 15.233. I genuinely don't have words for how ridiculous and how insanely high that is. That's without a stick bonus as well. So he could be 2/10 up on that, because if you don't get a stick bonus, it means you've taken a deduction on the landing. And if you've taken a deduction on the landing, it means you've got at least 1/10 there. And then if you take that 1/10 off and then add the stick bonus, you're 2/10 up. So he could be at 15.4 on that routine. He's got a 6.5 start value, though, which is insane. And no one in Europe even approaches that, because you've got what? 5-1, 5-4, 5, 5-3, 4-9, 5-2, 5-4, but I think that's without one of his releases, and then 4-1, but that's definitely without his releases. I think he had a 5-6. So I think the highest was a 5-7 in qualifications. Let me just double check. Yes, the highest in Europe in qualifications was a 5-7. And Joe Fraser can do a 5-9 if he puts Casino in. And I know I'm comparing to him a lot, but he's also the best high bar worker I know, and he's the best. Like, he's got the highest start values and stuff that I know. So it's just easy to compare with him. But yeah, you got 15.233, 15.0 with the stick bonus, so that's as high as it's going to go. And then 14.7, which is, so their third place was 4/10 higher than our first, and our first place was well above anyone else in our final. European. I'm saying R as if it's like I'm like a part of this, but yeah, in terms of in Europe in general, yeah, we're very, very far behind on high bar. And if I'm honest, I have no idea how we're going to close the gap. Discounting things that look like fools, like potentially Karimi. So I think they had 5 clean high bar routines. They had 6-5, 6-2, 6-2, 5-6, and 5-1. So they were well ahead. They're well ahead on difficulty. They're similar on execution, but because they're so far ahead they're well ahead on difficulty, and they're similar on execution, but because they're so far ahead on difficulty and they keep the execution up, their final scores are rocketing up. So yeah, not to shame anyone in Europe. Like, I know that Anthony Munside was, like, he's got the capability to do some insane routine. I've Lukin, and I think he can do squat half Coleman. I'm pretty sure he can do Casino. So if he can do all of those in a routine, then he's well up on difficulty. I think he'd be around that sort of 6-2 mark. And if he can execute it as well as he did at Euros, then he'd be at 15s. But other than that, it's really hard to tell. Other than that, it's really hard to compare the two, because they're just worlds apart. But yeah, maybe it's just a matter of some people in Asia just rocketing their scores up and making it seem like they're untouchable. But I don't know. It seems pretty dire, as much as I'd like it to be a bit closer. But in general, in total, we're not actually too far away. I think it's literally just P-bars and high bar that Europe as a continent struggle with more than Asia. But when you're comparing to scores as high as that, like, they are at like the pinnacle of what you'd expect a gymnast to be. Like, their scores are the highest you'll probably ever see. Obviously, we're also only half a year into the first year of the 4 years of this code. That was said in a really bad way. I apologize. We are only 6 months in to this 4-year code. So they still have, well, we all still have 3 years to sort of catch up to each other. And work it out and figure out the best ways of doing it and learn the new skills that put us in the best positions possible. and use the code to our advantage. So we've still got a long time to go before the Olympics and before, well, maybe not before Worlds, but before any team events in Worlds as well. Because this year, Worlds is just individual. So all around and apparatus finals, no team. So if that's better or worse, I don't really know. But I think potentially next year it'll start being like team events again. But I have no way of knowing. But all in all, that's the rundown of sort of where we're at as a team and as a country and as a continent, and how we stack up against the best of the best. Hopefully that gives some sort of idea of what sort of scores you need to be aiming for as a specialist and also as an all-rounder, because people like Adam Azil obviously had an insane ring score, 14.766 on rings. Obviously, you don't need to be aiming for that on every apparatus. And if you're not a rings worker, you don't need to be working for that high on rings. But I have worked out the averages for the top 8 in the all-around just to give some sort of idea. So the average all-around total score was 81. Floor, 13.6. Pommels, 13.233. Rings, 13.3. Vault, 13.833. P-bars, 13.796. And high bar, 13.25. So consistently around mid-13s, above mid-13s on each apparatus would get you to where you want to be. Obviously, these scores are going to fluctuate quite a bit depending on what you're like as a gymnast. So if you're a floor worker, that will go up, but then maybe something else will come down. Maybe pommel will come down, maybe rings will come down, that sort of thing. But also, this is just in Europe. I haven't done these sort of numbers with Asia. If you do want me to, and if you do want me to sort of work out where they're at, in terms of averages, in terms of what sort of scores you want to be looking towards on each apparatus, then I can do that. That's fine. Do leave a comment down below and I will be on it. But I hope you've enjoyed so far. What was the other thing I wanted to focus on? Well, I also did averages of the D scores and the E scores. Floor was around 5-1 and 8-4 execution. Pommels was around 5 with 8-3 execution. Rings 4-7 with 8-6 execution. Vault somewhere between 5-2 and 4-9, closer to 4-8, sorry. Closer to 4-8, but with a few 4-4s and a bunch of 5-2s thrown in there. And then 1-5-6 with Adam Azil's vault. But obviously with vault, you're just going to go for the biggest score anyway. P-bars around 5-1 with 8-5 execution. And high bar around 5 with 8.2 execution, 8.3 execution. So hopefully that gives some sort of idea. But I think with these, the biggest thing is just to like always work to yourself. Like I can give you these sorts of numbers and say, oh, you need to be aiming for this execution and this difficulty to be like the average European like all-around gymnast. But also at the same time, you want to be always pushing for more. You always want to be pushing for higher execution, higher difficulty, and then higher final scores, obviously. But I think something that is interesting is that based on these numbers, I can also work out exactly how many people got bonuses on each apparatus. Half the people in the top 8 got a stick bonus on floor. A quarter of them got it on rings. One person got it on vault. So 4 on floor, 2 on rings, 1 on vault, 2 on P-bars, and 3 on high bar. Were the amount of people that got stick bonuses on those apparatus. So I think if you want to be pushing for those higher scores, that's another thing that you really want to be pushing for, getting stick bonuses on each of those apparatus. And then another interesting thing is also that half the people on vault, so 4 people on vault, stepped out of the lines as well, which is also quite interesting. So staying within the lines and not getting penalties on that is also very important and something that I need to work on as well. But yeah. So yeah, hope that helped. Hope you got some sort of insights into what sort of scores you need to be aiming for and what sort of scores are good, bad, whatever. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Game of Gymnastics Podcast. If you do want any sort of more rundowns of scores and of competitions, things like that, then do leave a comment down below, leave a question down below, all that sort of things. All those things. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.